the Tudors Dynasty Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rebecca Larson. Well, March was Women's History Month, but on this show, we really like to celebrate women on nearly every episode. So today we are going to celebrate women in history, but we're also celebrating the birthday of Dr. Emma, who I welcome back. Happy
Hi,
birthday,
Rebecca.
Emma. Happy birthday.
Thank you. Turning 40 is definitely a milestone.
It
So
is.
technically my birthday is May 22nd. So this will be aired on my last day in my 30s. So
I feel so
can
honored.
I start crying now or should I wait until the end of the episode? No, I'm only kidding. It's great. Best time of my life.
You know what? Your 40s are fantastic. So embrace them. Not that I would know because I'm like 15. So
Yes. But you think you know because you can envision it. Good. That's what I'm envisioning. Amazing things in my 40s. So I'm excited. I'm ready. And birthdays in May are always fun.
it's a perfect time of year to have a birthday.
Well, I'm going to Chicago tomorrow to see some friends who are coming from Spain to visit me for my birthday, to laugh in my face that I'm turning 40, so they can do it here in person in Chicago. Then we'll come to Minnesota. We like to go to the cabin in Minnesota, so we'll go up north, and it's just gonna be fun to turn 40 because it's about who you get surrounded by, really, and who you're with celebrating these things. And I'm very lucky to be celebrating with my family and my friends this time.
I love how quintessential Minnesotan you are now because you are going up north to the cabin, which is such a Minnesota thing to say.
Well, I am becoming American very soon.
Yes, congratulations.
So, oh, you betcha.
There it is again.
There it is. I'm from Bemidji, actually. Inside Minnesotan joke here for the listeners.
Yes, from Bemidji. So, Emma, why don't you let the listeners know kind of what we're going to be talking about today?
Well, today this is a special request for my birthday because I want to talk about a wonderful initiative that has been going on in the Prado Museum. You guys know I talk a lot about this museum because I study a lot of the artworks in its collections. But the good thing about this museum, it is out of all the big museums in Europe that were founded from royal collections, it is the one where women had a most crucial role in its birth, in the conception of its collections, and also in the contributions of really masterpieces of art into the collections now that are showcased in the rooms. So it's impressive to think that women have been, because of a woman, we have this a wonderful museum, and because of women that are linked to the royal houses of the ruling houses in Spain throughout time, we have amazing masterpieces by Titian, Rubens, and other amazing artists. So Velázquez, it's something to feel very proud about as a Spaniard. And I am very close to this project because the scientific director is my mentor and she was my advisor in my PhD. Her name is Noelia Garcia Perez, and she's doing a wonderful job. She is the most hardworking person I know, and the public is responding really, really well. So I invite everyone to this summer when you go to Madrid in this trip everybody's doing this summer to Spain, including me. I booked my flights last night. So I'll be there in July and August, and I'll be going to visit this new itinerary of the women that contributed to the collections of the Prado Museum. This time, second edition in the 17th century.
Ooh.
But in the first edition, it was the women in the 16th century. Well, really starting at the end of the 15th century with someone we've talked about a lot, Isabella of Castile.
Wonderful. And I just have to say, if you've never checked out the website for the museum, please do, because you can see so many amazing paintings on there as well.
They have a special website for El Prado Femenino, and they have so much information there of the activities. This is a multifaceted initiative. It's not just the itinerary that is now running. It was inaugurated some days ago, and it will run until the end of September. So now you can follow an itinerary. You can download it before you go to the Prado Museum. You can even download it and follow it in their virtual tour that they have now if you can't make it to Spain this year. So you can actually do it from home. But in this case, you can download the pamphlet and you can actually look at it and see where these works have been placed. And it's basically two types of works. It's the portraits of these women, so we can see them. We can see who are the women who contributed to this amazing museum, but also the artworks that they had in their collections and that finally became part of the royal collection, Spanish royal collection, and therefore became part of the Prado Museum. Let's remind everyone that the Prado Museum started because of a woman, a queen of Spain, the Isabel de Braganza, Isabel de Braganza, and she was the wife of King Ferdinand VII of Spain. And she was the one there's a painting of her as foundress of the Prado with the Prado in the background that is there, and you can go and visit. So I encourage you to look at their website, and if you can, I encourage you to go to Madrid this summer because it's going to be amazing. And check out all the initiatives they have. They have tons of activities to do surrounding this initiative that is basically just a justice thing, right? It's women have had a tremendous impact in the artistic production in Spain, and this is a way to showcase it in our most prestigious institution, really art institution, which is, it's a privilege really to be able to be part of this. I was lucky enough to be part of the first edition because that's the time frame I study with a person we've talked about a lot too, Mary Tudor. So I wrote the piece on her and a first idea on how Mary was a great patron of the arts. It's just something we don't know because of all this bad press that she's had over the centuries. So it's amazing to be able to contribute to that with talking about one of the Tudors, really.
Well, we always love when there's a connection to the Tudors one way or another. Yes. And we'll include links in the show notes as well to the websites and any other things that Emma wants you to be able to see. But Emma, where do you want to start on this?
So we can start by talking about those first two portraits that in the first itinerary. So this year, like we said, the itineraries are focused on the women in the 17th century. And they are as important as Christina of Sweden, who, for example, had a very interesting life. And she ended up, because of her, we have the big room of the Muses in the Prado Museum with now her painting next to it that was restored because of this Prado Femenino. And these Muses are sculptures, ancient sculptures of the Muses of the different arts, the liberal arts, that are showcased in that room because Cristina was the one that collected these pieces and they ended up in the Prado collection. Also, Cristina, for example, was an outstanding art collector, and she had pieces by Dürer. We in the Prado Museum, they have Adam and Eve by Dürer because it came from the collection of Christina of Sweden. Dürer was one of the leading artists in the Renaissance. So in the 17th century, there's people like Christina of Suecia who are connoisseurs of that art of the Renaissance and are collecting this art that ends up in the collection of the Prado Museum. So this is the type of women. For example, the other two protagonists of this edition, the second edition that is running until the end of September, are Mariana of Austria and Elizabeth of France, who became the two queens of Spain, to the two wives of Philip IV of Spain. And these women were painted by Velázquez, who, let's remember, is one of the most outstanding artists of all time in terms of portraiture and his impact in court portraiture and in Western art, really, Velázquez had, right? Because he's one of the big names. He's one of the big names in not only in portraiture, but just really he marked a revolution in the arts. So I think that we could start by saying that this all started as an initiative of the current director to showcase, Miguel Faramir wanted to showcase the women and what women have contributed, because he realized that he had all this information about women and how they contributed to the Prado Museum, but it was not reflected accurately in all the content they had. So he entrusted this project to an expert in artistic patronage, who is Noelia Garcia Perez, and she's curated 2 editions now of a temporary itinerary, but it stays as a publication, so you can actually buy the book. It's called A Female Perspective in English, and you can buy both editions, and you can see the works of art that she's selected to do this job that she's been entrusted to, really showcase contributions of women. So in the first edition, it was the really the beginning of the Spanish Royal Collection is during the time of Isabella of Castile, and she was the first person to be showcased in this itinerary of the women, the patrons of the arts, the female patrons of the arts that are crucial in the construction of the collections of the Museo Nacional del Prado in Madrid. So we start with Catherine of Aragon's mother, how connected to the Tudor that can be. And because of that, she was placed next to her granddaughter, Mary Tudor. And when I was doing one of their Instagram lives one morning there, they do an Instagram live every morning on Wednesdays, is in English. So you can do that. It's 10 minutes before they open the museum at 10 a.m. You can follow it. You can see it afterwards. They always post them on their Instagram page. And I did one of them last summer when I was doing a research stay there. And people, when Isabella of Castile and Mary Tudor were placed together, people were not entirely surprised, but yes, oh, okay, that they're grandmother and granddaughter, right?
Yeah.
And that's how important the Tudors and the Spanish alliance really is for somewhere like the Prado Museum, that the first 2 women are connected to this alliance that we've talked about over and over and over in the podcast. I don't know how listeners are not tired of listening about the Spanish alliance and the Spanish monarchy in connection to the Tudor court, but this is how crucial it is, that they are the 2 first women in the first itinerary, were Isabel of Castile and Mary Tudor. That
I think
beautiful portrait by Antonis Moore that I'm in love with and I can't stop thinking about.
I think we've been leading up to this episode from the
We have.
beginning, since you
This
and I
is
have
what
been
I wanted for my birthday. See, it's perfect.
I mean, if this is the first episode that you're listening to, you're probably a little bit lost, and I would recommend going back. But Dr. Emma
Yes.
has been teaching us a lot about women in the arts from the beginning, and understanding Catherine of Aragon's part in it and Mary the First's part in it. And here we are today, almost full circle into bringing it all together.
Yes.
And this is very exciting.
Also, we've been plotting to travel to Spain at some point.
Yes.
To do an itinerary of all the connections between Spain and England in the 16th century, with women like Isabel of Castile, because she has an alliance with Henry VII, with the founder of the Tudors, then Catherine of Aragon, and then Mary Tudor. But also that goes on into the future with the fight between Philip II of Spain and Elizabeth I of England.
Yeah.
And then now that I'm moving on to continue to study these artistic relations into the Stuarts, and so the 17th century, this gets reactivated with James I and the Sixth. So, I mean, this is a whole process of how Spain and England are deeply connected, especially in the creation of high quality art, court art, portraiture, and these kind of things that these monarchs exchanged when they became allies, or they would commission when they wanted to show their ally doing something, like, for example, I'm thinking of the painting of the family of Henry VIII, the allegory of the Tudor succession, that Mary and Philip are portrayed coming into the throne room, where Henry is in the middle, Henry VIII. They're coming in with Mars, with the god of war. There's a lot of types of ways to represent dynastic power, and this type of art that is, for example, in the Prado Museum, is also connected to the Tudors, and to this alliance that we've kept on talking about so much. So that's how connected El Prado Femenino, the female perspective, is to all the episodes that we've been talking about. think about the room where Mary Tudor is exhibited next to her grandmother Isabella of Castile. She's also exhibited with Isabella of Portugal, who we did an episode about, painted by Titian in a very similar model to the one of Mary Tudor, painted by Antonis More next to it. But also all the portraits of the members of the Spanish monarchy, different courts in Portugal, in Vienna, painted by Antonis More that are there. And these are Mary's cousins. So one of the things that when you're standing in that room that you realize is how connected these portraits really are. Right. Because there's elements that are repeated. For example, all the gloves are very similar. We know that Mary received at some point before she was Queen of England gloves from a noblewoman from Spain whose name we don't know, but we know that she received 10 pairs of gloves. These are probably the gloves that she's wearing in the portrait by Antonis More. So all of this participation in the female perspective got me thinking so much about that portrait of Mary Tudor that now I'm obsessed with it, and I study it over and over, and I go back to it when I study other things, and to this point I just think it's my favorite portrait really of Mary Tudor. I can't lie. I have another one that is coming strong. We can talk about it too, but this one of Antonis More, it's just when you see it in person, it's a different experience. So anyone who hasn't seen Mary in person should go to see Mary in person. I'll have to take Dr. Peter Sifel, to see Mary, because I don't think he's seen Mary in Madrid, and we can't have that, right?
No.
We need to take Peter. So he's coming to the tour, I think.
He needs to be on the tour.
I think he'll be up to it.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And I think on the episode that I had with Dr. Steffel recently that we talked about a specific Mary and Philip portrait where they're kind of, I don't know, their heads are bigger than their bodies, and he's leaning up against the chair, and Peter mentioned, I think that was the portrait or the painting where he had mentioned she was wearing blue and gold. And I thought it was black, and the two little dogs on the bottom. That's such an interesting painting to look at.
My eyesight always goes to Philip because he's in such an awkward position. But it is a very, very interesting portrait because of the elements present. Like that chair that he has is very important. That appears in portraits, similar chairs. Well, Mary Tudor is sitting on a chair that I was looking up to identify in Henry VIII's inventories that was decorated in the Spanish style. And because of that, we know that portrait, because Antonis More painted more than one portrait of Mary, and his helpers too, because these artists, we always have to remember, worked with other people. And we are still trying to figure out the ways in which these workshops are working, because attributions change, and then sometimes when you see, for example, a painting that says workshop of or attributed to, sometimes it's not solid information. Sometimes it's just connections that you are able to make, right? So we always have to be careful. This is a long time ago, but in the case of all these portraits of, for example, painted by Antonis More of Mary and of Philip, and all these things, they're very important because they stay during the Elizabethan period, and they're used in other paintings, like the painting that I just mentioned of the allegory of the Tudor succession, where Philip looks very similar to that painting that you just mentioned. He's wearing a similar style. So this is all about also the birth of the royal collection in England during the reign of Henry VIII. The first time we have an inventory of the goods in the royal collection in England is when Henry VIII dies. There's a whole inventory that's carried out. So we know what was in the royal collection then. Then it was Charles I who took it to the next level. But then after Charles I was executed, everything was sold. And some of those works at that moment went to Spain, and they're in Prado Museum now too, because the King of Spain bought some of those paintings. Like, for example, the self-portrait of Dürer was in the collection of Charles I. Then, during the Restoration period, the royal collection was rebought. So What I do a lot in terms of the study of my connection to El Prado Femenino is also we have to understand that these royal collections are amassed by the monarchs, but also their spouses, their consorts. And that's not something that is very clear. For example, that is something that we have to study in relation. And I did a study last year. I had a grant to do a comparative study of how, let's ask the same question that Noelia Garcia Perez asked for El Prado Femenino for the English Royal Collection. Have women been crucial to the configuration of this collection? Short answer is yes. Long answer is yes. Indeed. Crucial in the inception, because it's during the reign of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon the paintings at least, that are the medium that becomes more relevant as to classify a collection as modern or in the Renaissance style in the 16th century, is born at this point in the reign of Henry and Catherine, a lot through the exchange of portraits with the court of Margaret of Austria. So that's how the female perspective has influenced people like me who have participated in the initiative to study and to broaden this initiative and think. It's more of a way of thinking now, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are applying this way of thinking to other collections, and the results that are coming back are saying women were crucial because they had a lot of the control of the narrative with this creation of arts. We talked about a figure like Mary of Hungary. She was one of the women that were showcased in the first edition as a great patrons of the arts. She created the image of Charles V. That is one of the most persistent images in history. We all know Charles V. We see him in our brains. That's because of Titian, an artist that Mary mostly commissioned. So this is how important the women were. And the bottom line is that this happened because there was different conditions from women in the Iberian Peninsula. They had a different status, especially in terms of the law. So they had a bigger presence in the public sphere. So therefore, they had to do more work to, for example, construct the image of their households, of their lineages. This is how this developed into what becomes a revolution, really, with Isabella still, because she is an iconic queen. Remember the episode?
You just pulled that title right back, didn't you?
Pun intended.
I have to go back just a little way, and I don't want to get off topic too much, but you said something that intrigued me a little bit, and I want to understand it, and I hope you have an answer for this. When you said after Charles I's execution, his paintings were sold, how did they go about selling? Did they have like an estate sale? How did somebody in Spain know about this, and how do they go about buying it?
Oh, you're talking about one of my favorite topics now.
Oh, good.
I've been intrigued by the collection of Charles I for, I don't know now, 6-7 years. And just because I study the collection of Henry VIII, that inventory that I've told you, I just wanted, and then I realized that the royal collection in England, now the collection of now Charles III of Great Britain, comes from that collection of Henry VIII. So I've studied its trajectory, and there's a definite point where we know exactly what there was again, which is after the execution of Charles I, who, by the way, this is amazing. So Charles I was executed in front of his art collection because he was executed in Whitehall Palace. So the last thing that he saw in this world before his head was chopped off was he went through the banqueting hall that Inigo Jones had created for his father, and that Rubens had decorated the ceiling with paintings of the reign of his father, so the glorification of the beginning of the Stuart dynasty, while he was walking towards getting his head chopped off. How amazing is that? And Charles was really the one to take the English Royal Collection to the next level, largely because of two reasons. First of all, he was educated by a queen that was a patron of the arts. Anna of Denmark was a leading patron of the arts, and she instilled that in her sons, Henry and Charles. But also because Charles in 1623 traveled to Spain, to Madrid incognito with the Duke of Buckingham, because there was a negotiation going on to marry him to Mariana of Austria, the Spanish Infanta. And he traveled to Spain. He was there for months, and he was marveled when he saw the Spanish Royal Collection, and he became obsessed with having the same paintings and the same quality of artworks in his own. He started purchasing a lot of artworks until his head was chopped off. And then, yes, the paintings were, so everything was gathered and the prices were fixed for everything according to, and so there's paintings that are identified by their artists, because those are, if they're by Titian, it's an old work, so it's worth more. And Titian is a very valued artist. If it's not, if the sitter is someone they know, or it's a known, there were paintings that were famous already that Charles had in his collection, by Dürer, by all these artists that we're talking about from the previous century. So then all these paintings were set in different houses. There were a price fixed for them, and agents from all over Europe came to see them. So there was a Spanish agent that was there for Philip IV of Spain, who was like, how can we have these things go to waste when some of them are masterpieces of Western art already in the 17th century? So this is why Philip IV, who's also a patron of the arts, wants these things, who is the patron of Velázquez, the Diego Velázquez, the most famous painter of in the 17th century, with arguably with Rubens and Van Dyck, but at that level, right? So this is how really connected both collections are. And when you study them both in tandem, you start to see connections between them, like portraits of Charles V in the Royal Collection in England, or the painting of Mary I in the Prado Museum. Mary I of England, right? Amazing. It's because of these artistic relations between Spain and England during the Tudors and the Stuarts and later on.
Yeah. Absolutely amazing, Emma.
Yeah, it is very interesting, and Mary is definitely a milestone moment, because when you look at all these portraits by Antonismo of the women in the Spanish monarchy, Mary's the only one sitting down.
Oh.
Why? Because she's the ruling queen. Right?
Yeah.
She's holding, and they say she's holding a Tudor rose. No, it's not a Tudor rose. It's a Lancaster rose. It's a red rose. But a red rose, it's a polysemic symbol because it also represents her as a bride. This is a painting that is done when Emperor Charles V sends Antonismo to England to paint Mary as bride to be to the heir of the Spanish monarchy, Philip of Habsburg, who is going to travel to England to marry Mary, who is made king, by the way, to marry Mary. He becomes king of Naples to marry, so they both marry as monarchs. So this is how important the beginning of this female perspective is connected, how connected it is to these portrait exchanges, for example, of the Tudors and the Trastámaras and then the Habsburgs. But if you move on and you look at other artworks that were contributed, for example, there are works by Titian. One of the most famous paintings of all time is Charles the fifth of Germany, the first of Spain, on horseback after the Battle of Mühlberg, right? Painted by Titian. This is a huge, huge painting that is showcased in the Prado. Well, this is in the museum because Mary of Hungary was the one to have it and own it. There's a very interesting video. If you go to the resources in this female perspective in the Prado Museum, there's a very interesting video, and all these videos you can watch in English with the subtitles. You can turn them into English, so that way you can watch them in English. That showcases very well with type of like a comic strip type of cartoon how empty the museum would look without these women, these artworks contributed by women, and it's basically just empties. This is how important And this is arguably the best, one of the best museums in the world. I mean, nobody can argue against that, right? So this is something that has made a lot of the public in Spain, especially the women, obviously very proud. So it's a way to empower also a part of the population, to remember those people who have not had justice, right? Like these queens that are forgotten sometimes. For example, one of the main things is that the titles of some of these portraits have changed permanently to reflect better the what these women really were. And Mary Tudor is one of the examples, because before, she had in her label, she had second wife of Philip II. Well, yes, but above all, Mary Tudor was Queen of England, the first queen, ruling queen in England. I know Peter has argued a lot in favor of this, and I agree with him. I think she was the first ruling queen of England. I mean, yes, Jane was proclaimed, but yes, she signed a couple, but a person who actually exercised government, who actually created foreign policy, who was accepted by all her subjects and was able to exercise power. The first woman to do that in England was Mary Tudor.
Right.
So to give her her rightful place, when a girl goes there and sees her label, now she's Mary Tudor, Queen of England. She's nobody's wife, because she was somebody's wife, but that's not the important thing when it comes to represent her overall, and why she's someone that is there, and why it's important to know about her, right?
Yeah. Well, let's use the example if Queen Elizabeth II was referred to as Philip's wife instead of the Queen of
Right.
England.
Imagine that. That's a great example, because it does sound ridiculous, but at the same time, that's the way it was labeled, right?
Yeah.
And to be honest, like Peter was saying, because I was listening to the episode before we started this, because I'm obsessed with this podcast. And I'm obsessed with Peter's work. I think he's wonderful, and that was a very, very good podcast. So people can go and listen to that too, because we're talking so much about Mary too. One of the important things to remember with Mary is she created an image of power that was very strong in England, even after she married Philip. So she didn't just give in to him, and he became king of Spain, head of the Spanish monarchy, so king of all the new places in America, the whole Iberian Peninsula almost, until later he didn't become king of Portugal, but he was Archduke of Austria. He was really a powerful man, but she stood her ground, and she was still the dominant part in England. And she cultivated that image, and she pursued that everybody knew that, right? And I thought that was so interesting that Peter was able to unravel that with the study of her imagery, because imagery is important. Like we just said, we can close our eyes and think of Henry VIII, and we know what he looks like, right? Well, I know what he looks like because he's looking at me. Rebecca tortures me every single time.
I've been cropping him out of the videos, so nobody sees him anymore. It just ends at
But
my
he's
microphone.
there, people. This is what she does to me. I think she does this on purpose. It's very unsettling. Henry, now I can only see one of his eyes.
There you
But
go.
she has a poster on her. Yes, there he is looking at me. Every time I come to this podcast, Henry's judging every single thing. It just gives me power and empowers me.
That's why it's there. It's just for you, Emma, to empower you.
What do you think about that, Henry?
One of the things I love that you talk about so much on these episodes is Mary of Hungary, because honestly, before you came on the show, she was kind of just an afterthought to me. This European lady, whatever, she did her stuff over here. I had no idea how involved she was in the arts.
She was involved in the arts. She was called by many like the shrewdest mind in of her time. Period. Not a woman, mind. Like human. One of the most intelligent humans to live in the 16th century, for sure. Very capable woman, very committed to duty. And she reminds me, when we think about these women, we have to remember that they have a position of power, but it's this position of power is always linked to a man, right?
Yeah.
Because it's the system is the patriarchy, obviously. And in the case of Mary of Hungary, she has been overshadowed by Charles V, who was really the person to give her power. But Charles V would have been no one without first Margaret of Austria, well, without first his mother, who gave birth to him.
In the toilet.
Okay, you said it. Because, after I said that in the episode about the children of Juana, that got everybody loved that. But it's such a known thing in Spain when you study Spanish history, because it's a funny anecdote. So, but I wasn't ready for the impact of this revelation, Rebecca. I like it. I should look up more about these facts. But yes, he was born, and remember we said in 1500, but he would have been no one without first Margaret of Austria, Catherine of Aragon, who was his agent in England, and he visited twice. So we talked about this too. Mary Tudor, really, who also was always there for him. This was a very tight knit family because the women were extremely dutiful and loyal, and Mary became the creator of his image, of his propaganda, the one to from a place where she was governing, which was the Netherlands. It was a center of art creation, worldwide, innovative and high quality art creation. She created this image of power of Charles. For example, this is a very cool anecdote connected to, again, the female perspective and Mary Tudor. When Mary becomes Queen of England, Mary of Hungary is like, oh, great, I know who she's going to marry. She's going to marry Philip, who is the son of Charles V. Let's remember Charles V had been betrothed to Mary, and then he married Isabella of Portugal, and that's why the whole affair went down in the Tudor court too, right? We've talked about this.
Yeah.
Well, fast forward to 1553 when Mary becomes Queen of England. And she is, yeah, she's been crowned. She is going to make it. She will rule England. She's going to be married to the next King of Spain. And Mary sends a portrait of Philip to her cousin Mary Tudor, because they're cousins, and she says, look at this portrait by Titian of Philip, who's going to be your husband. This was painted some years ago, so he looks more like a man now. And she tells the ambassador, make sure the queen looks at it from afar. This is how you view this new art by this new artist. So she's teaching Mary Tudor how to look at Titian's work, because Titian is starting a revolution in portraiture. Portraits had been very small before. So Mary really is at the center of artistic innovation and the production of high quality art. And she is sending this out to the world to help Charles become the most powerful monarch in Europe, really, and in the world, because this is the time where all these monarchies are starting to span worldwide too. So that's how important Mary of Hungary really is. She was the person that we talked about that commissioned the enormous paintings of nude men.
Ooh la la.
Yes, nude men, people, because we think the women in the Spanish monarchy are prudes, but no,
I'm listening.
no, they loved to see a gigantic painting of a nude man full of muscles. They were into that, apparently. Mary of Hungary was into this. She didn't want it in her little praying chapel. She wanted it out in her palace in case she had to throw a little party.
Right.
The men were there to remind that, life is wonderful. So it was for nude men. But really what they're representing is the torments that the giants the giants suffered after. So it was a message that if you didn't respect Charles V's authority, you would end up like the Titans and end up suffering great torments, right? And so through the use of Greek mythology, this is how involved this woman is in the Renaissance, because nudity, mythology, all of this is what I think people haven't grasped about someone who also had religious paintings that were amazing, that are now in the Prado Museum, like paintings by Roger van der Weyden and other types of artworks that she contributed. These women were not just pious women. They were also deeply, they were courtesans, and they were deeply involved in the amazing part of the Renaissance that became that new idea of the individual as the human body as something beautiful, and the recovery of antiquity, and all these beautiful artworks from antiquity where everybody's naked and we all love, right?
I can't stop thinking about how she told Mary to look at the portrait of Charles from afar.
No, from Philip, the portrait of Philip.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
From farther back.
Well, the portraits, Titian paints in a new form, which means he paints in a larger scale. So it is better for you. And he has a wide stroke, and the way he paints, you can see better the portrait if you're standing back, because these portraits start to leave the personal private spaces to become part of portrait galleries displayed in public places. So the format has to be bigger. If it's different when you have a portrait of someone that is little in your for yourself to look at, to remind you of that person, than when you're in a palace, when many portraits are displayed and you're saying, this is my cousin so and so. And we have accounts of ambassadors visiting these places, and for example, if you had to talk about someone, you would just stand in front of their portrait and be like, oh yeah, he's doing all right. He doesn't look like that anymore. He lost one of his front tooth, and he lost a leg in the last. So what I mean is, they also have a power to represent an absent person. So, for example, when we analyze the portrait collection of Henry VIII, why I know that Catherine of Aragon contributed so much is because the majority of the portraits are of people of the Spanish monarchy,
which is amazing.
Some of them are still in the royal collection, like a portrait of Charles V, where you can see how beautiful he really was. No, it's a portrait that really represents Charles V as he was, with his huge jaw, that actually Mary Rose Tudor probably had when a portrait painter was sent by Margaret of Austria in 1514, when Mary was painted as the bride-to-be of Charles. So yeah, this is how. And then when you see, for example, the portraits of Charles V by Titian, he's had some Photoshop on that chin. You know what I mean? He's wearing his beard, which is makeup for men.
Yeah.
His chin is like he's either had surgery, or Titian was good with Photoshop. You know what I mean?
He's had some work done.
He's had some work done. Yes, exactly. One of the last portraits of Charles V is in the Royal Collection in England, in the Royal Trust. So there's a lot more work that needs to be done in these connections. Especially, they're all bubbling in my head since I participated in Female Perspective in the Prado, because you start to see how the women are really the ones exchanging the portraits. It's usually the women. It's, for example, Mary of Hungary again, who is the one in charge to oversee Holbein when he arrives to paint Christina of Denmark, when Henry VIII wants to marry her.
Right. That full length.
The full length portrait that is in the National Gallery in London. There is a copy, a shorter format copy in the copy, we don't know, probably a later version. But it was already in the collection of Henry VIII. There were two portraits of Christina. There was the full length one, but also a second one. And at least the full length portrait, we know it was executed by Holbein. We have details of how long it took. So we have details of that actual sitting, and but they were not going to let Christina marry Henry. They were like, yeah, but Holbein can paint her, sure. And Henry actually fell in love with Christina when he saw the portrait, because that's what he did. He would just see a portrait and be like, oh, I love this one. Yes, bring her over. I promise I won't chop off her head. And then he would. So that's why Christina was like, no, thanks. I'm going to pass. But Mary of
Yeah.
Hungary still had to enable Holbein to do that, because even though she was very upset with what happened to Catherine of Aragon, life continued and Mary Tudor was still there. And see how
Right.
fast she activated everything when Mary became queen? She was like, okay, get the Titian portrait of Philip, send it to England. Come on. And then Charles was like, St. Anthony's Mall. We want a picture of this new queen that is half Spanish.
Right. What a
I
big
mean,
deal.
first Queen of England was half Spanish. I don't know if that's a hard pill to swallow for some people, but it's the truth. You can't go wrong with the truth, right? Can you?
No,
No. So
no.
they no.
When Catherine of Aragon came to England with all of her Spanish entourage, they
Exactly.
married the English. A lot of them
Well,
did.
Catherine of Aragon and Castile,
Yes.
aka Catherine of Spain, that's the name that Thomas More uses when she arrives in her, well, not when she arrives, in her coronation poem. She's called Catherine of Spain. So, but she's also, for example, when she arrives in the pageants that are done for her great entry in London in 1501, there's also references to her Lancastrian origin. So there are many aspects of the Antonismo portrait that have not been studied before that I'm studying, because it's a portrait filled with symbolism. I know you love symbolism. So it's filled with that. But I would recommend you, I mean, the best thing is to go and see her in person so you can really fall in love with her, because there's a video of the restoration. The painting gained a lot after it was restored. Mary looks, before she looked yellowy. It looked just tired. The painting looked tired. When it was, and that you can see it in the video, when the varnish, the old varnish is taken off, and you can see something that the ambassadors described. Mary had porcelain skin. Her skin was very, very fine, very fair, and it was admired by people. Imagine at a time where people had all sorts of things on their skin, to find someone who had super clear, beautiful skin like Mary did. A lot of people say, and this was something that was taken off the description of the portrait, that she wasn't good looking because there's, always bad press with Mary. Well, that's not the way she was described many times. And we have to remember two things. First of all, she's 37 in this portrait, okay? So she's not a 15-year-old girl. Maybe people should realize that the majority of the paintings that we're looking at of portraits of really pretty girls are 15, 14,
Right.
10, 12, 18, 16. It's not the same to be 16 to be 37. I know that now that I'm going to turn 40, okay? Maybe one day we can show a picture when I was 16,
Right,
and
right.
people can realize that you don't look the same when you are in your late 30s.
Well, and they didn't have the skincare products that we have now.
Yes. And second, this is not a portrait to represent Mary as someone sensual or someone beautiful. It is a portrait to represent Mary as someone majestic, as someone powerful in a new way, because women have not been represented like that before. So the portrait, she has a tension in her look that is just mesmerizing, because it's just, you're like, she is powerful, you can tell just by looking at that portrait. But at the same time, there's something in her look that is, you can see her sorrow, what she's been through. I don't know. It's just very powerful when you see it in person. The way Moore is so good at doing that. He's done all the elements of the symbolism. You're like, oh yeah, this woman who's sitting and has this rose in her hand and these gloves, she's in charge. But then when you concentrate on her face and you look, and it's someone, it's someone. It could be someone that is next to you. So this is the power of Antonis Moore too. And I think everybody should go, and you can tell one of the best things is when you stand there, you can go to the next painting, which is the one of Isabella of Portugal by Titian, and you can tell that's been painted post mortem, so after her death. It's too idealized to be a person, a real someone. Whereas the portrait of Mary Tudor, I swear to God, I stand in front of her and one of these days she's going to talk to me. She will. I mean,
I love
imagine
that.
that. No. Then you have,
Her head turns and she starts talking to you. She's like,
oh,
"Hey, Dr. Emma."
no, then I would just go back to my friend's house and just have a nice cool afternoon because or maybe call a doctor. No, but it's yeah, it's that is how powerful and captivating that portrait is. The good thing is now one of the good things coming out of these new perspectives they do in the Prado Museum is they have a very good new experience in that room too, because like we said, one of the biggest elements in that portrait is the gloves that Mary carries in one of her hands, right? They're clearly showcased for a reason, as they are showcased in many of the Antonius More portraits in that same room. And you kind of like, oh, these people are connected. They have the same gloves.
Yeah.
Literally,
Yeah.
it works when you see them together. Well, now they have an installation there that you can go and press a button and smell those gloves, what those gloves smell like, because those gloves were infused with perfume, because those
Oh,
gloves were very, very high-end gloves that were used by the people in high-end in courts as gifts, and they would use perfume in them, because if you're wearing them and you're going somewhere that's not a good smelling place, you can just use your gloves to cover sort of your
right.
nose area, your mouth area, and also because it's just a beautiful gift to give to someone. You know, imagine opening that package when Mary Tudor opened that package with 10 gloves that just smelled wonderful. So you can look at the paintings, see all the gloves, and then go to the installation and smell what those, because we know what they smelled like. So that's how cool it is, these all these new perspectives into the experience in a museum that is, you know, one of the leading museums in the world. And the female perspective not only has, in that sense, it has, it's multifaceted. So they did documentaries, you can watch them. There's three 30-minute documentaries for this new one, and there's four 30 or 45 documentaries for the previous one. So there's a ton of content, free
That's
content
so
that you can
cool.
go and see in their website, and you can activate the English subtitles in all of them. And it tells you the stories of these women. And I don't know, they're so interesting. I am really intrigued by the figure. I was recently in Madrid. I visited the Prado Museum and I went into that room where that new painting, after its restoration of Christina of Sweden, has on horseback, is showcased now with the sculptures of the muses um that she had in her collection that are now there in the museum too. And that portrait really got me thinking, this woman is incredible. And then reading the story about her, she's also a fascinating woman that I didn't know about 2 years ago. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
study this. This is how cool this initiative is. Even if you go into the website where all the female perspective stuff is, there's different sections for women artists, which is something really in vogue now, and it should be. So
Hmm.
you can see artwork. So this every day they feature a work by a woman, for example. So you have new content every day because it just they have also like a very cool map, infograph, a map of all the women and their connections and the artworks. So it's a great place to just get lost for an afternoon if you can't
Brilliant.
make it to Madrid this summer. You can definitely spend hours on their website because it's wonderful. They've got links to all the conferences and all the related content to all these women. So that's how cool it is.
Fantastic. And we really have to work out a tour. Maybe 2026. Maybe that gives us
Yes.
some time to plan. I already got some time or some stuff planned.
2026 is going in the books.
Start saving up now because Emma's going to be our tour guide.
Okay. Well, I will be more than happy to guide you around the Prado Museum. Because the first, second edition will all be there. Let's hope the third one is around because this goes on. So the 18th century, there's more women. The 19th century, so this is how cool this is. It's a long-term project, and it's for everyone. It's for children too. They have like activities for children. They have a very cool initiative for people who like to write in the internet to edit the Wikipedia pages of these women to correct. There's a brainstorming session to change the pages of or create the pages because a lot of these women don't have the pages in Wikipedia. So it's like a cool initiative that involves everyone really. You can get involved in it from many in many respects and levels. So this is
Brilliant.
how cool. It's very cool.
Very cool. Well, Dr. Emma, why this time always goes so fast.
It does, especially when you're having fun and talking about things you love. I was there. I couldn't see it because it hadn't been, so it's just been opened now, the itinerary, but I will see it this summer when I go there. So if anybody is around Madrid this summer and you can reach me out on Twitter and things if I'm there. And if I can be someone's guide to the new itinerary of the female perspective, I'd be more than happy to do it because I'm not going to miss it. I'm going to take my little girl Susan. She's
Oh.
a bit obsessed with Queens now. I wonder why. Uh,
Yeah.
she is helping me. So as you all know, I'm writing a book on the artistic patronage of Catherine Marron, and she's doing the pictures for my book. So I've
Right.
got a lot of material for illustrations in my book. So I need to take her to Madrid and show her what I love doing and how wonderful this is. And I want to congratulate Noelia Garcia Perez for this initiative because she's doing a wonderful job, and the feedback couldn't from everyone could be it was a complete success. Number one, number two is going to be even better.
I love it. Well, Dr. Emma, happy 40th birthday.
Yeah, woohoo! Now I
And
feel like I need to go and find a place for happy hour or something. No, it's early. It's early. I'll wait a little bit.
it's noon somewhere.
It's noon somewhere. Okay, maybe later.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Rebecca.
much. Thank you.
Next time we get together, we'll have to celebrate my 40th birthday.
Yes, yes. Maybe this next time I'll have to come see you instead of you always coming to see me.
Sure. Okay.
Sound like a deal?
It's a deal.
Deal. All right.
It's recorded in the podcast, so now you're gonna get out of it. Just gonna
I'll,
remind you each time.
I'll just edit it out.
Okay. No worries.
All right. Well, Emma, I'm sure you'll be back again soon, but thank you for coming
Yes.
on today.
Thank you, Rebecca. Have a great day, guys. Bye bye.